You're listening to Going, a podcast about missions where we talk about going where God is at work. I'm your host, Jesse, missions leader, here with Jen, our missiologist, and Alessandro, our church planter. And we're excited to talk to you about missions. All right, we're back with another episode. Episode 3, I guess. This is our third recording, at least. We'll see how they end up getting put together as we release them. But we're excited to conclude our conversation, kind of this conversation we've been having about doing missions with. And so this episode today, we're going to conclude it with talking about partnership. But before we get into partnerships and before we start talking about all of this messy mission stuff that we've been talking about, let's talk about something else that's messy. Jen, is French food really as good as they say it is? And I will remind you that you're talking to two people living in Italy. So I think there's a little bit of a battle here between Italy and France
So
over
let
what
me
food's better.
start by saying that the French will say that the only other country that is as good at food as they are is Italy. So the French acknowledge and
Wow.
honor Italian food. There's
Awesome.
a great mutual respect, I would say, between at least from the French side to Italy. There's phenomenal respect. I give Italy props because I'm gluten free. And I'm telling you, I cannot believe how well Italy does gluten free pasta, gluten free breadsticks, like all the stuff, which I cannot find in France at all. So, in the last episode, Alessandro was talking about filling his suitcase when he travels places to bring stuff back. I don't bring anything back from the States when I go there, but when I go to Italy, that's where I take an empty suitcase and I come back with loads of gluten free pasta and things like that that I cannot get good quality here. That being said, yes, French food is great. French food is great. It's surprising that the surprising thing about it to me is I guess I expected it to be complex, w- you know, and really it's pretty simple. The concept of good French food is very much enhancing the natural flavors that exist in the food. So it's not about making things complex or different. It's about how can I make this tomato taste like the best tomato that I've ever eaten. And so there's a simplicity to it that I find quite beautiful and elegant. But yes, it's good.
Yeah, I will say I've been to quite a few different European countries, and if I had to rank my top 3 favorite, it would probably be um, Italian, French, and Spanish. Actually, I really
Hmm.
enjoyed the food I had in Spain.
100% agree.
Not to prolong this conversation, but I've never had French food. I've been to Canada and Montreal, so that's as close as I got to French food. But what I'm surprised is that I cannot find French food unless you go to one of those high fancy paying a lot restaurants, which you don't find me there unless Jesse invites me. uh, and so I've never tasted French food because of that reason. So you can go to Italian food and you could find it from
True.
high paying level to getting a pizza. So that's the only I've never had it. I
Well, you
want to
could have a
try it, and
crepe.
so
You could go to a creperie. That's sort of the French form of equivalency of pizza, I would say.
okay,
And they're fairly
okay.
inexpensive. And a good creperie will have the salty crepes, meal like a meal, not just a sweet Nutella crepe, but a good. And that's lovely, and that's
Mm,
good. And we go there often. Yeah.
sounds lovely.
Hmm.
Well,
Okay.
Alessandro, maybe you and I need to do a guys' weekend and go watch a rugby tournament in Toulouse, south of France, and enjoy some French food sometime together.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, enough talking about food. Alessandro, why don't you kick us off this time and um, just give us a little bit of, we want to look at if we're talking about doing missions with God, if we're talking about doing missions with others, um, this idea of partnership.
Yeah, I'll start off with just saying that when we started talking about missions and this idea of using Jen's dissertation about missions with, and I think the thing that hit me or that got me excited was the idea of figuring out what it looks like to have partnership. I remember before leaving the States, I had my last preaching in the church that I was pastoring, and I preached on Philippians 1, specifically verses 3 to 6. And I'll read it for us. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And I preached that to my congregation to kind of say, and I want to have this partnership. Like I'm leaving, but I want to have this. But what I'm finding difficult is understanding the different layers of partnership, and
Yeah.
kind of seeing a little bit of what you wrote, Jen, about this being different layers. And you can talk more about the layers, but I'll tell you what I find difficult is I have this problem and this issue about stepping in people's toes or being afraid to ask for something because I feel like I'm sheep stealing or missionary stealing, that I never know like what that looks like, because I think at one end your a partnership can be confused to joining forces and becoming one, right? We're not trying to say, well, let's start something new or let go of yours and come join us. And I don't want to do that. I want to appreciate and honor what you're doing, and say, wow, I want some of that to influence us and vice versa, that we can influence you. We could be a double blessing. And then another one is the right timing, like to ask, should it be? I'm kind of a relational person, and so I kind of just kind of wait for the moment. But a lot of times when I hear of other partnerships that have been birthed, I felt like I missed my opportunity because I didn't say anything. I was like, oh, I have that relation with that person. How come I didn't think about asking? I thought that it would come naturally,
Mm.
whereas another person just asked them, hey, I'm church planting, you're a missionary here, why don't you help me out, or would you want to help me out? I didn't know I could ask that.
Mm.
So I'm all over the place, and probably because being a pastor back home, we really weren't focused in partnering, except with already the association that we had. And being here in missions, it's sort of like, okay, you're kind of on your own, so the partnership is all the more what you need.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just I kind of just threw out the
Mm.
problem, at least what I'm facing, and the confusion. And I would love for you to
Are you looking
kind
at
of
it? Are
maybe.
you looking at it more from like the pastor's role in partnering with missionaries? Is that kind of where you're coming from it, Alessandro?
That's a good question. I would say both. I would say because I'm both a pastor but also a missionary, and so from a pastor's perspective, yeah, like how do I invite missionaries that are there not to church plant? Because obviously, if they're church planting, that's what they're trying to do.
So
But
not all
more like
missionaries are, but yeah.
yeah, and so if for those who are not, that like how do I invite them to help us out while we help them in one way, but also then as a missionary, how can then I be of a partner or of a blessing in communication and providing resources to others?
Mm.
So like the whole package deal.
Mm. Yeah, you hit on kind of the two things that I think are critical. One is this idea of, yeah, there's different levels of partnership. And while I would say collaboration is the highest level, and I'll talk about what that means, it doesn't mean the other levels are bad. All of the levels can be useful. All the different types of partnerships can be helpful. All the different types of partnerships are visible in the kingdom of God. So just to say that collaboration is the highest form, what I mean by that is that it's the most intense and it takes the most, time and effort and all of those things. But it doesn't mean it's the only one that's valuable or the only one that's worth anything. There's associations. So one of the easiest forms of partnership is this idea of an association, whether it's being a part of an evangelical association within your country, or in France we have a group of foreign workers field leaders conference where different leaders of mission organizations come together, and we're not necessarily doing projects together in those associations. We're more saying we all kind of have a kingdom vision, and we're trying to be aware of what the other people are doing and how they're doing it, so that we're not ignorant, so that we're not stepping on toes. Like the French have a church planting website that shows you where different church plants are happening and going on, so that we're not planting two churches one block away from each other when there's whole villages that don't have any churches. And again, we're not necessarily working together to plant those churches within those associations, but we have an awareness. And so just having an association that's useful, it's helpful, and it's sort of your most entry level form of partnership that you can have, like just being aware of what other people are doing in your city, in your country. And that can be created just by most French cities have what they call a pastorale, which is a group of all the pastors who are a part of the evangelical association. They get together once a month and just sort of talk about, how it's going in their churches and what events they're planning. And once a year, we do a common worship service all together. So that's a joint effort between all of the members of the pastoral. But otherwise, it's just a group of pastors and church leaders that come together and share what they're doing and how it's going. So that's important level. Then there's partnerships where you have a project in mind, but you know you're going to need help. So you invite others to participate, but you already have the vision, you already have the mission, you already know what you want to do. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. But you recognize, hey, but we need the help of this person to do this and this person to do that. So you're inviting them to join in a project that you have going. And that can go both ways. Other times there'll be someone else who's launching a project and they'll say, hey, Alessandro, we know your church is really good at outreach. Can you come help us with the evangelization piece of this project? Or, hey, Jesse, we've heard that you have this connection within the sports world. Could you help us with this piece of the puzzle? And that's another form. For me, what collaboration is not when I come with a vision and ask you to join it, which is what a lot of mission organizations will often do. Hey, we have this project and let's recruit all our local partners to put all of their energy and effort behind what is essentially our project or our vision or our mission. Collaboration is coming together and saying, let's discern together what God might be inviting us to do together if we were to join our forces. And together, you determine the vision and the mission, and together, you set out for it. There's a proverb. I've heard that's African. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Collaboration takes time. It's messy. It's hard. It involves a lot of mini deaths to myself and my vision, because even if I want to come in and say, let's build something together, I do have some ideas. I do have some preferences about how it will go. I do have, my own culture that I'm bringing into it. I do have my own way. And if I'm truly going to collaborate, there's just going to be a lot of having to get to know each other, like you were saying, Alessandro, building relationship, a lot of building trust, of getting to know what are the strengths, of drawing out. Sometimes I can call out a gifting that I see in someone else that they haven't even recognized yet in themselves. A lot of listening and discerning together to determine what is this invitation that God has for us, what is God asking us to do, and how do we work best together, and who else do we need at the table. And that takes time. So when I built Elan, which is the association that I created here in France to help missionaries integrate well with this vision for missions I did it with French partners. And when I first wrote up the plan and had the idea, I had a timeline of, I'll launch this in 18 months. It took 3.5 years. But it took 3.5 years because I didn't want to do it. I wanted to collaborate with French partners. So rather than saying, okay, here's my vision, here's what I think we should do, that's when I went back to what we talked about in that first episode, that one-day learning community, where I said, wait a minute, what does need to be done? I came with the problem of, I see a lot of missionaries here who are burning out, who are leaving early, who are struggling, who aren't having effective ministries. I see a lot of French partners who are frustrated with foreigners, who don't know what to do with their missionary partners, who have a lot of misunderstanding about what missionaries are trying to do. Here's the problem. What do we see together as possible solutions? And then I needed to get the right people around the table to help solve that. Then we had to build trust together. And then we had to figure out what does this project look like and how do we do it together. So I wanted to go far, but going together means it's going to take time. You're not going to go fast.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to say. I was going to say time. It sounds like time is the piece, the timing of things, how long it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesse, I hope you took notes because you got to get something going here.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because what Alessandro's alluding to is I also have an idea or have a hope to see something similar to Elon, and I'm sure we will get into it, Elon, in one of the episodes. But something very similar I would like to see happen here, and I've been trying to slowly pull the pieces together. So maybe Jen, we need to have a conversation offline on that 3-year process. What does that look like? How do I
Hmm.
do that well?
Yeah, I think what was jaw dropping with what you said. I think as being great. Thank you for elaborating all that. But I think I don't know if you felt this, Jesse. But what was jaw dropping is when you said there's a website that you can see where all the churches are in France and stuff. Where so you don't what we don't have that. Like I'm surprised when I find a church in the corner. Like what? Where did you guys come from? Here, like we just don't know. Or like I wish there was like I can find one group of churches
Yeah,
that are like in the same, let's say, denomination, and I can find them, but not something that where it's exhaustive, or at least close to being exhaustive. Obviously, there's always going to be churches that kind of fly off the radar, but I think that's super helpful.
Hmm.
Just that is
I
beautiful.
was recently helping with the church, and we knew of one other church in the vicinity, and the church's meeting had storefront, classic kind of European storefront setup. And one day I was walking to the church building, and I heard worship music playing from a different building. And so I walked over there, and like there was no signage or anything. There was just kind of like some flyers of a dance studio and all these different things that they use. And so I just kind of peeked my head in, and there was another church meeting, literally like three windows down. And I found out that it was just a random group of believers that were using this kind of renting a space on Sundays. Um,
Which we
and
should give context for particularly North American listeners,
mm,
where in the US there's a church for the equivalent of about every 3,000 US citizens. So it's pretty common to have to like many people will drive say 5 miles to church and drive past 8 churches to get to the church
yeah,
that they attend. I don't know what the stats are in Italy and France. We have about one church for every yeah 30,000 inhabitants. So there's whole villages that don't have what we would call a witnessing fellowship. They might have an old cathedral or an old Catholic church building that may or may not have regular mass anymore.
hmm
We have, you know, yeah, most cities. If you go France wide, it's one for 30,000, which means there's a lot of need for churches to be spread out. The French have a vision right now for one for 10,000 is what they call it. They'd like to get to the stat where they have one church for every 10,000. One evangelical church for every 10,000 inhabitants in France. Means we got to triple the number of churches here. So to have two churches, a block apart when the next, district over, the next neighborhood over maybe doesn't have any is
yeah.
sort of a fail or
hmm
it's definitely not a
And
win.
there
Yeah.
was no communication, which was the other
Right.
piece.
Exactly.
Like, why not? Our the churches that I was helping, they there had a banner. It was very visible. So why not go there and say, "Oh, we were interested in this space," and see if there was an opportunity for partnership, or
Yeah.
what could have happened
Yeah.
as a result. But no, until this day, there's been no crossover of, how could we work together for the neighborhood. It's just kind of, and that's sad, like you're saying, Jen, in a place where there's so few believers. I mean, we're talking about churches of like 15 people. We're not talking
Right.
about
Exactly.
100 or 200 people. We're talking
Exactly.
15 people.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we do
yeah.
the
I
same
I
thing.
just remember.
Go ahead, Alessandro.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just remembering a story. This is more in the U.S. context, but I just remember we were my former church where I was serving. We were renting a space, and we still are. That church is still renting, and it's like a hall. And another church started renting the bottom hall, and they had different services, like a different time service, I should say. And I remember one time they were practicing while my pastor was preaching, and so I kindly went downstairs, and we never had conversation, never, they knew that we were meeting up there, and we've been there for years, but we also didn't do our part. We didn't try to talk to them like Jesse's saying, but I remember one time they were practicing, and I just kind of went down. I was like, "Do you mind like maybe like post like kind of moving it a little bit later, just because my pastor is really preaching at the moment, and we could hear it." And the lady, the worship leader, looked at me and said, "No, we got permission from the owner that we can use it this time." And I was like what? I was like, God's our owner. I was like, what do you like? I'm not trying to fight you. Like, I
Right.
really just said that. I was like, I'm not fighting you. Like, I'm just asking you if you could, like, I was just so
But that's
shocked
such
when
a
she
good
said that.
point, Alessandro, because if we don't collaborate, if we're not cooperating, we're often competing, even if it's inadvertently. Even if it's not intentionally, we're competing for resources, we're competing for people, we're competing for dates on the calendar. And we really shouldn't be doing that in the kingdom of God. We really should be all rowing in the same direction. So, and I think I see it on the mission level too. I see, a mission organization that wants to launch this thing to, do something for, I don't know, workers in Europe. And there's something that exists already in Europe that is doing that thing. Why would we not figure out how to support that and join in with that? Why recreate something that's going to compete with it? So this goes back to what we've been talking about before of listening, paying attention, seeing where God is at work, and also, yeah, learning how we can work together so that we don't end up, yeah, competing with one another.
So
Yeah.
just if I can jump in real quick, what are, because we kind of hit a lot of different things, and I wanted to kind of, can somebody, because I don't have it in front of me, uh, lay out kind of what are the types or degrees or layers of partnership that we mentioned?
There's the awareness was the first one. Are we just
Awareness.
aware of what's going on, with others in our area? And then there's sort of a cooperation or a partnership where we invite someone to join our vision or our idea, or we lend our support and our enthusiasm and our resources to someone else's project because we
Okay.
can share and we can help one another. And this is a really simple, there's you could
For sure.
gradiate this into 1,000 different layers, but if we're going to go three main, it would be just sort of awareness, then there's that level of cooperation, and then I would say collaboration is that highest form where we actually come together to develop the mission and the vision itself before we launch into the project, and that we are co-owners, because at the end of the day, people support what they help create. That's
Mm.
sort of a fundamental principle. People are
Was
most
association
enthusiastic, and this is at the level of collaboration. People are
collaboration?
most enthusiastic and most engaged in a project that they helped create. People support what they
Mm.
help create. So when I already have a project and I'm inviting you, I have to do a lot of convincing and explaining, and I have to ask you to adapt to me and to what I'm doing. But if together we've created something, we all have buy-in, we all have ownership. And that's the beauty of collaboration.
And was
Yeah.
was association in there too, or was that something, were we talking about
That
something
was the
different? Was
first
that
level.
awareness in a? Okay.
Well, association, yeah, association we could put between awareness maybe and cooperation. We're
That's what I was
associated with
thinking.
one another. But in
Okay.
the association level would be that place where you're creating awareness. We're associated because we're all pastors in this town. We're associated
Okay.
because we're all missionaries in this country. So yeah, through association we develop awareness. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah. If I could extend the list of problems.
Oh
Like,
no.
I feel like that's my job here. um, no, but at least from experience, I think sometimes with partnerships or the obstacles of partnerships, apart from competition and some of the other things we talked about, is the fact that, at least maybe I feel this, is this idea that you feel like you have to bring something to the table, and usually bring something to the table means that you have to be somebody to say something, right? Sort of like, hey, I came in, and 2 years in, I don't know anything about Italy. My church is still struggling to get two or three people to come, and now you want to say something to a church that's been there for 40 years and they got a sizable church, and you're like the one to propose it. So there's this like, who are you type of thing, idea. So the one is like, you have to be somebody, or your church has to be something, of a movable force to kind of have your piece to say. I have the force to get a force moving, right? And then the resources, right? The financial resources or the investment, like what are you putting in? And so sometimes I found that to be um, an issue. Like I happen to have church planted outside the big cities, and so most missionaries are in the big cities, and so a lot of times it's so difficult for me to kind of say, hey, why don't we do something together? Where are you again? Can anything good come out of there? uh, and so I have to really sell it. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of put those realities out there.
So
Well,
this is a cultural issue too, but we're both in cultures where relationship is king. So
Mm.
I think even more than showing results, which is what you've been talking about, how big is my church, or how, what results can I show you? I think building trust and confidence through relationship is what gives us the capacity and the inroads to partnership and collaboration. Um, Not so much being successful as being known and being faithful. And that matters a
mm,
ton in France, but that also takes time. It takes time
yeah.
for people to know that you're not going anywhere, that you're committed. And so often we want to be able to collaborate, and we want to be able to run before we can walk.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing actually about the cultural aspect. I feel like there it is cultural. And the other part I was going to say, I'll just use some of our kind of personal situations that Alessandro maybe know, and we'll kind of give some context to. But like, I feel like it might be more. I wonder if before you can get to collaboration in a relational context, you need to do a lot of cooperation, of working together and things. Like I think
Hmm.
um, like Alessandro and I did something, but as we're talking, I think we would have said partners, like equal 50-50 partners. But I really think the event we just put on together, really, it was me cooperating with their event in many ways, which was great and was awesome. But as
All
we're
forms are
kind
good.
of yeah, as we're kind of talking through it, I'm thinking I probably would shift how I look at that now to look at more as a cooperation over a collaboration. Um, and I'm thinking of my personal time here in Italy, and like I alluded to earlier, I want to launch something that I think would be a collaboration with some other leaders, but there's only one leader, for example, in particular, that I have been relationally getting to know and cooperating with since 2020. And so we're 2024. We're now just thinking of collaborating and launching something together. So I've been here for 5 years, and I know a lot of other leaders, but I haven't actually cooperated with those other leaders. I haven't actually invested time and energy into doing things, coming alongside them and things. And so I probably am not ready to collaborate with them yet.
Yeah.
And so even as we're talking this out, I'm thinking, some of the other leaders in Rome that I think would probably be good pieces to have in this idea that I want to launch soon. It would be probably good for me now to invest some time cooperating with things that they're doing or
Bingo.
that
It's
I'm
so
doing and
good,
bringing them
Jesse.
into so that we could do that collaboration.
That's so good. Think of it in terms of stages too. Like rather than thinking, okay, I want to collaborate, think, what do I need to do to get to the place where we could develop a collaboration with this group of people? There's I think it was a book called Three Cups of Tea. Um, and I can't even remember what country it was in, something, I want to say Middle Eastern. But the concept was that you can't even begin to talk business, even if you're a business person and that's your whole point for being in the country, until you've sat and had 3 cups of tea with the person. And you've talked about family, and you've talked about, all of these things that we as Westerners, type A people, we can just, take for granted. If I walk into a boutique in France and I say, could you please tell me, where the scarves are? That's rude because the first thing you have to say when you walk into a French boutique is bonjour. And I've misstepped already. I've been the rude one immediately if I don't follow their cultural rules and their cultural norms. So my first step when I go into a store is bonjour. And still today, if I forget to say that, like I can feel the reprimand coming to me because the person will say to me first, bonjour, madame. And then they will go into answering the question. Even if I want to buy something on, the equivalent of Craigslist in France and I have a question, if you don't start with bonjour, I mean, in US, I'd say, hey, is this thing still for sale? Here,
Yeah.
that would be so rude. I can't do that. So we have to move into the culture in a way that respects the culture and know, okay, so if in 2 years, I want to have this collaboration with this person, how many cups of tea can I drink with them between now and then? And what does that look like? And like you said, Jesse, how could I partner with them? How could I show interest in what they're doing? How could I let them get to know me and what I care about? How can I build this? And that's why, like I said, Elan, I thought would launch in a year and a half, and it took 3.5 years. That's what I was doing the whole time. I'm meeting with people. I'm going out to lunch. I'm having them over for dinner. I'm learning about their ministries. We're finding our points of shared passion. We're discovering places of shared interest. We're recognizing places of shared concern, and then the collaboration is all the more fruitful when it happens.
I think just having that language is super helpful. I mean, as simple as it is, awareness, cooperation, and collaboration. That to me already gives me language to realize um, not everyone is going to be in the same level. And I think I was kind of thinking that way, at least when I first came in. I think getting to know Jesse and having these conversation offline, and working together, I've come to realize, oh yeah, there are different levels. In fact, when we did this event together, I already had kind of showed him that different and in a different aspect, but sort of same language. And I do agree with what Jesse said about, like, yeah, that was more of a cooperation as opposed to collaboration. And I think even that, like that language, I mean, I think that's what this podcast is. It's just sometimes just stating what we already know, but we didn't have a language for it or thoughts about it, and then having some ideas and stories that go with it. I think for me that's super helpful.
Yes, indeed. I think, yeah, we're just talking about our experiences, and so yeah, definitely, hopefully, with us talking about our experiences, and in this case, Jen's research and putting this all together in a nice doctoral dissertation will help connect the dots for somebody out there. But yeah, thank you all for listening. This was another episode of Going, and we look forward to talking more about missions, getting into more topics as we go forward. But please, if you enjoyed anything about this podcast, even just our travel tidbits or food stuff at the very beginning, please share and give us a review. And we look forward to hearing your feedback for future episodes.